what I do in my meditation practice has changed radically over the 16, 17 years I've been doing it. I meditate twice a day. I meditate for 15 minutes by myself in the morning, and my wife and I meditate for 15 minutes together after dinner. And I always read a couple of spiritual books, sometimes 3 spiritual books, short readings before I sit, because it gets my head into the right space. And Sarah reads out loud a couple, 3 pages out of whatever Buddhist book. We're big Buddhist book readers here in our household. And she would read a page or 2 of something at night, and sometimes we talk about it, and sometimes we don't. And then we sit together for 15 minutes in silence. And I got to tell you, it's one of the most intimate things we do in our lives together, and try to actively enlarge our spiritual lives.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you're all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. Greetings from Studio AA deep in the heart of Texas. That was the voice of our featured guest this week, Bill S., and you're going to hear so much more from him in just a moment. But first things first, this episode is made possible by Kelly, Terry, Adrian, Kurt, Todd, and Anonymous. What, you may ask, did Kelly, Terry, Adrian, Kurt, Todd, and Anonymous do? Well, they visited our humble little website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on that little yellow donate tab at the bottom of the page, I believe it's located now, and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Kelly, Terry, Adrian, Kurt, Todd, and Anonymous. This here episode is coming right out to Ewans. Okay, so a little inside baseball here, or a behind the scenes look at my day, even though most of you probably don't need it, but you're going to get it here in just a moment. And by that, I mean that I just recorded. Okay, so here's how it works, right? I record the basic, like the guest at some point. Right, we get on and record them, and then I gotta save that. And then when I'm ready to actually release their episode, their appointed episode, well, I come on and I do an introduction, and then I do all the listener feedback and all that kind of stuff at the end of the episode. Well, I went to do that today, and I popped in. I had to get a new SD card because I got a new device to record on and all that sort of stuff. I won't bore you with all that. But I popped in that new SD card, and I did all of that recording. And then guess what? Apparently I forgot to format the card. So I had to go get an old SD card. I'll figure all that out later and anyway, it was all for naught. I was talking into the mic, having fun, kind of yucking it up, talking to you guys and all that sort of stuff, and then it was gone. Now, one thing I did want to mention here is that this came to mind. I was in a meeting earlier today, and there is a gentleman there. He goes to our group. It's in the Frisco group. His name is Colin. I don't think he'd mind me mentioning his name. And if he does, I don't know. I'll talk to him about it later. No, actually, I'll talk to him about it. Hopefully before I release this, if I remember. But nonetheless, Colin in the meeting said, well, I think the subject was step 2 or higher power or something like that. But nonetheless, he said that when he first got to Alcoholics Anonymous, he looked at the ceiling in the trailer where we meet. Yes, it's a very bougie trailer. Just kidding. It's not. We've gotten better. They replaced the green carpet that had been there for, I think, 150 years or something like that. But anyway, and it's gotten better, but it's still a trailer, but the spirit of God is within that room, and I absolutely love it. But anyway, he said he looked at the ceiling and there were some electrical outlets up there. They use them for what do you call those things? The LCD projectors or whatever they put on the ceiling to project images. And so he looked at the ceiling and saw those electrical outlets, and that's what he used as his quote, higher power before he could get something a little bit more apropos or a little bit more significant. So he was, I don't know why, I just got a kick out of that. So he'd look up, he'd see those electrical outlets, get it higher power up, it's high in its power outlet. No, that's right. So anyway, it just kind of came to mind, and you got to hear what came to mind from me. So now on to our featured guest of the week. By the way, this gentleman is a very interesting gentleman. I actually have another episode with him. This one's called Enlarging Our Spiritual Life. But I have another episode with him that I'm going to release in the future. And that one is about the book that he wrote. This is the guy who wrote the book called The Writing of the Big Book. It is absolutely fascinating. You're going to find out a lot of things about the big book that you never knew, or at least I found out some things I never knew. And he did a lot of research that he put into this book, and it's really cool. But this one, we kind of started out more with his story, for lack of a better word. And this one's called Enlarging Our Spiritual Life. Bill S. is from Fairfield, Connecticut, and he has been sober since, drumroll please, 1981. We mainly end up talking about meditation in this episode. That wasn't our intent when we started, but that's where the Spirit took us. And, we just went with it. We rolled with it. So we discuss, or Bill kind of discusses, what a vital spiritual experience means to him. We discuss his stay at the High Watch Farm. Now, the High Watch Farm was, my understanding, I think this is the way Bill explained it, this was inspired by Bill Wilson and others back in 1939-ish. And this reminded me of the term health farm that they use in the big book on page 131. And I'm assuming that's what they used to call treatment centers back in the day, health farms. It has a nice little ring to it, doesn't it? Anyway, we discussed where Bill got sober and how when he got sober, the people in his group were more what you would call directive rather than supportive. And Bill talks about the seismic changes that took place in his sobriety and much, much more. I know you're going to enjoy this one, and we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this here episode. Enjoy. Okay, everybody. So today we're sitting here with Mr. Bill S. Well, I already introduced. So Bill, I'm going to have you go ahead, introduce yourself, give your sobriety date if you wish, and tell people where you live in this great land of ours, please.
Thank you, John. My name is Bill Shaberg. I'm an alcoholic. I've been continuously sober and active in Alcoholics Anonymous since December 7th, 1981, and I live in Fairfield, Connecticut.
December 7th, 1981, huh? So is that a Pearl Harbor Day?
That is a Pearl Harbor Day. That's the day when people crash and burn, and I did it in 1981 with spectacular ongoing success in AA.
Okay, so and what part of Connecticut do you live in again? I'm sorry, you said.
I live in Fairfield. We're about halfway between New York City and New Haven on the coast.
Yeah.
So I Fairfield is on Long Island Sound, and I live in a beautiful, beautiful area close to the water. We have a tidal salt marsh in the backyard. Twice a day back there, there's a big lake, and twice a day there's like right now a mud flat with a stream running through it. So nobody's got it better than me and my lady Sarah.
And how long have you been married to Sarah?
Sarah and I got married in 93. We got together in 1986 when she was 365 days and 1 second sober because I had met her. She came into my Saturday morning step meeting, and I thought to myself, good Lord, let that woman please have come here from Rhode Island and have 3.5 years of sobriety. I was almost 4 years sober at the time. Didn't want a woman with more time than me. And it got to her, and she said, hi, my name is Sarah, and I'm 6 days sober. And I was like, oh, Jesus. And I waited 359 days before I kissed her. Because in my men's group,
Yeah.
to do anything less than that was treacherously dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. I understand.
I grew up in a very directive men's group, and one of the rules you did was you didn't mess around with newcomers until they had a year. So
Yeah, I understand. I tried that. I didn't quite make it a year, but I remember my sponsor saying that he had tried that with so many guys, and finally he just gave up and said, listen, if you're going to date during the first year, just stay really, really close to the program. And at least I did that part. So we are sitting here and together today because Mr. Bill C. introduced us. How do you know Bill?
Bill Cleveland.
Yeah.
Uh, I used to go to California. I live in Connecticut. I used to go to California all the time on business, and I would go to Redondo Beach, which is south of LA. And I was in my home group one time, and a guy came in and he introduced himself as being from Redondo Beach, California. And I said, so I talked to him afterwards. I said, I go there all the time, probably 8 times a year on business. I love going there. He said, do you go to the Monday night meeting of the oh God, I'm so bad on the but they had a men's meeting on Monday night. I said, no, I've never been there. He said, I want you to go to the meeting, and I'm going to set you up with 2 guys, J, S, and Bill C. Yeah. When you get there, just look for those guys. So I went there. It was the Hermosa Beach men's stag, and they have a banner on the wall that says, I loved it. I walked in, I thought, now this is my kind of A meeting. It said, do the steps or die. And I met Bill there, and I met Jay there, and Bill was here just a few months ago with Jay, and we all went up to Brown University to do some research in AA stuff, most especially on Hank Parkhurst is what I was doing up there. And I talked to Jay probably 3 times a week.
Yeah.
So
Jay's been on here before 3 times actually. And you guys are both, I know you're a historian. I know Jay is a historian. And I'm assuming that is what you guys end up talking about sometimes at least.
Well, yeah, it is. But we also talk about our lives in our sober lives and what we're doing and what's working for us and what's not working for us. Because my own experience has been things that worked for me in the past need to be changed up somehow just to keep it alive and well and fresh and, vibrant and vital in my life. We're talking about, book talks about having a vital spiritual experience, and everybody focuses on the spiritual word there. And I get that. I'm fine with that. But I tend to focus more these days on vital.
So
vital.
What does that mean to you, vital?
It's got to be alive and well. So, for instance, although I'm a guy who doesn't have any real supernatural elements in my life, I get on my knees every single morning. I've been doing that since I was 6 years sober. When my sponsor got in my face and was very annoyed with my lack of faith, and he said, "I don't care what you believe or don't believe, but I'm telling you right now that a man who's begging for sobriety needs to be doing it on his knees every morning." So I started getting on my knees and doing affirmations every morning. But I changed what I say in the morning, because if I was still saying the same thing I was saying when I was 6 years sober, it'd just be rote. There'd be no vitality to it. So I have things that I say in the morning. The things that I said this morning was something that I had wordsmithed 4 days ago, and 10 days before that, and 3 weeks before that. I keep changing it all the time. I type it up, and it's my wife
Oh.
bought me a Lady Sarah bought me a little kneeler, because I'm getting to be an old guy. So getting down on the floor. So I get on this kneeler, but the kneeler has a bit of a top to it, and on the top I just fold over the piece of paper, and I've got what I want to say every morning when I do that. But
And did you grow up in the Northeast?
yeah, yeah. I was I was born in Stanford, which is 4 towns away, and grew up in Darien, which is 3 towns away, and lived in New Canaan, which is a town north of Darien, and now I'm in Fairfield.
There's a couple things we want to talk about today. Number one, I just kind of want to get a thumbnail sketch of your how you got to Alcoholics Anonymous and whatever you want to say about that. And then I also want to talk about the book that you have written. It's called "The Writing of the Big Book," right?
Yes.
So let's kind of set this up first with you and what you've done in Alcoholics Anonymous, how you came here, and then we'll talk about the book.
Well, like everybody else, I did not arrive here on the wings of victory, and I was 38 years old, and I'd been drinking pretty hard since I was 16 years old. I was one of those guys, though, who showed up at work every single day, however hungover or smelly I might be. I was at work every single day. And, I got out of high school, went to college. I graduated at Fairfield University in 1966, which is the local Jesuit university here. And went in the Air Force for a couple of years, Vietnam War years, and came home and started working in my dad's local family blueprint shop. And I just did that. That's what I was doing. I was married, my first marriage, and I was drinking all the time. I was drinking every day. I would just drink until I kind of passed out or went to sleep. But a day did not go by unless I had some sort of special reason for that particular day not drinking. So, and I woke up on the morning of December 7th, 1981, after it was a Monday morning after a really bad weekend. I think most people have whimsical thoughts about suicide. My God, maybe I should just kill myself. But that particular morning, December 7th, 1981, when I woke up, I thought that in desperation and the fact that I was feeling as bad as I was feeling and how screwed up my life was, that the best thing for me to do would be to kill myself. And it wasn't a whimsical thought. It was like, okay, I live in an apartment. I'm divorced now. I live in an apartment. I've got a gas oven, stove. I could, put the wet towel under the door and turn on the gas and just end it all. My sister had gotten sober. My sister Catherine had gotten sober 5 months before that, and I called her up, and she had me drive over to her house, which I could barely do. Pointing the car was a real challenge. And she took me to a meeting. Then they took me down to the local hospital where they checked me into detox. And then I spent a couple of weeks at High Watch Farm. I don't know if you know the history of High Watch Farm. It's the first rehab. Bill Wilson and the boys took that over in 1940, I think. Anyhow, I went to High Watch Farm and stayed there a couple of weeks, came home and started going to meetings with my longtime sponsor, King Dykeman. King was a philosophy professor at Fairfield University. I'm a philosophy guy. I graduated in 66, but in 72, I took a night class with King. And he was the best teacher I had ever encountered in my entire life. And every time he taught a night class in those days, I took like 6 classes with him. So I get into AA, and who's the big kahuna? King Dykeman. He's 25 years sober.
Wow.
Jesus, he got sober when he was 22 years old. King was my sponsor until he died in 2017, and we were joined at the hip. And he wasn't just my sponsor; he was my sage, my best friend, and we had a really great relationship. And he was one of the reasons. I talk about the deal breakers. People who come in, they get, I'm not a joiner. I'm not a joiner, so I can't be doing that. And here was this guy who was clearly not, he was the kind of guy that I admired, but he was a big joiner. He belonged to Alcoholics Anonymous, and also I think there's a lot of people come in AA and they're just too damn smart. They know they're so smart. So those stupid slogans on the wall and the same stupid people saying the same stupid things. And
Yeah.
I'm just, so believe me, if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm a very, very smart guy, let me tell you. And so every time I get into that, I'm too smart for this thing. My sponsor was one of my intellectual idols and the smartest human being that I had ever met in my entire life. Honestly, that's the truth. So whatever excuses I was coming up for bailing on Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, of course, I couldn't justify to him. I didn't even try to justify it. I knew that was going to be a losing thing. So I was saved by the fact that my sponsor was this really, really smart intellectual giant. And I don't know how I got off on that, John, but there I am. So,
No, that's fine. That's fine. And so you came in to kind of walk me a little bit through your sobriety and, some kind of milestones, whatever you want to say.
Sure. I have, I have milestones that are a little bit different from most people's milestones. And I'm not proud of all of it, but there it is. I came in, I got home from High Watch and I went to the Stratford Men's Group, which meets on Monday nights. And King drove me to that meeting. I had hooked up with him when I was up in High Watch. I had called him and talked to him. That group was a real directive group. In our area, we have very suggestive groups. Oh, yes, please. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. And we have very directive groups. Well, the Stratford Men's Group is a very directive group. And I needed that. That's what worked for me. I don't think I would have been able to go the suggestive route, although I know there's a lot of people that need that to get sober. One of the beauties of AA is that we actually recognize and accommodate the differences in human beings.
Right.
Not just men and women or old and young, but there's all kinds of nuances that go on. And one of them is this directive suggestive thing. I've heard, I know people who have gone screaming out of the Stratford Men's Group because it's just like, can't do it. I mean, the foundation of that particular meeting, whoever runs it, there's 5 different groups in that meeting. We break up into different smaller groups of 40 or so. And the format of the discussion meetings are somebody changes every single week and runs the meeting. And it's usually the most wounded beast in the room whose sponsor has said, you need to go take the card and sit at the head of the table tonight. So then he would tell us what's going on in his life, which is usually not good. And what we would say in German, it's schlecht, and then, you go to a lot of meetings around here. They read a thing, no crosstalk. The foundation of the Stratford Men's Group is crosstalk. Everybody is then supposed to offer this clown advice on whatever his problem of the day is. And if there's 40 guys in the room, 10 of them are just, they didn't even understand the problem. And 10 of them just never have any good advice, no matter what the problem is. And the other 20 guys have good things to say. So it's an interesting dynamic. But I came in and I went to the Stratford Men's Group, which was strong on fellowship. Nobody was writing the book. Nobody was reading the book. Nobody was talking about the steps. It was put your hands in your pocket, keep your mouth shut, don't drink and go to meetings meeting. That's what it was. And I stayed sober on the fellowship model for Alcoholics Anonymous, which I'm very much in favor of. And I've got no problem with that until I was 19 years sober, probably.
Wow.
And at 19, the lady Sarah has always been giving me, in the old days, these were little audio tapes that I would listen to in the car, speaker tapes, And so I was listening to these speaker tapes all the time. I really liked that. And it was just amazing to me. All these people, especially the California people who came out of Clancy's group, who are big circuit speakers, were always talking about the big book. The big book. Oh, they're talking about the big book. Now, I had read the big book at High Watch when I was a week sober. Made no sense to me whatsoever. As a matter of fact, my takeaway from the first time I read, however much I read of the big book, was that it was written by a real egomaniac blowhard. That's the only thing I remember. The only reaction I remember to reading that book when I was very, very first sober. So I started a meeting when I was 19 years sober. I started a meeting where we read the big book, and we read a page and a half of the first 164 pages every Saturday morning. And then we go around the room and talk about it, 20, 25 people. So that was my first exposure really to the big book. In 2003, so I'm I can't even do the math. I'm 22 years sober. So I'm 22 years sober. 2003, we had heard about these people in Texas who did step work groups, little private meetings, 10 or so people that would get together for limited number of weeks to actually go through and do the steps. We're not talking about studying the steps, although you can't do them until you study them, but it's a work group. So I had sponsored a guy who, after a year, went down to Texas, and that had been like 15 years before. And my wife sponsored a woman who got sober in Texas and came up here. So we asked both of those people to get us formats, and we ended up with a 6-pager and an 8-pager that came from these two different people on how to do a step work group. And one of them had a lot of Jesus in it, which was a problem for me. But I was the guy running this meeting at my house. We had 10 guys come to my house, and on a Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. So I was typing stuff up and doing things. And my sponsor, King, is sitting next to me at the meeting. And the third meeting he comes to, there were talking points in these original formats. These are things you could talk about in the meeting. And I had handed everybody the talking points for next week's meeting. And King had come in. He's a college professor. He had written his answers to all of these 8 or 9 things. And I thought that was so wicked cool that the next week's handout had the talking points as written homework. And that expanded and expanded and expanded. And today, if you go to the stratfordmensgroup.org, you can download probably 120-page format book for doing a step work group with 8, 10, or max 12 men, or 8, 10, 12 women. And
wow,
do your way through the step. I was 22 years sober. It was the first time I really did the steps. Honest to God. I mean, I've been going to step meetings and everything, but you go to step meetings, you just talk about it. Doesn't mean you're doing it. And I'm a great talker. So I actually did all the steps, and it was the most profoundly important thing I did in the first 22 years of my sobriety. I mean, it was a big, big, big turning point for me because it opened up a new level of engagement. And most especially, I told you we were doing this big book meeting. The second time we got through there, I hit that story about Jim putting the whiskey in his milk. And on the page before where Jim puts the whiskey in his milk, the quote unquote old timers, such as they were in 1938, said, he's been slipping a bit, and they were trying to figure out what Jim's problem was. And they decided that Jim's problem was that he had, quote, failed to enlarge his spiritual life, end quote. So the second time we went through that big book thing, this is a couple of years before we started this step work group, I'm thinking, well, I get that. I really do get that. I know what they're talking about, but what do I have to do to enlarge my spiritual life? So one of the reasons I started this step work group thing was because I thought it would be a good vehicle for me to get a grip on things that I needed to be doing to enlarge my spiritual life. And it most certainly did. I mean, for the first time, I actually did the steps, in the sense that I needed to do a graveside amend to a guy, and I didn't even know where he was buried. I complained to my sponsor. I said, I don't know where this guy's buried. I can't do this. He said, listen, you sponsored 2 lawyers. Both of those lawyers, I'll guarantee you, no private investigators. You got some money. Get a private investigator to tell you where the guy's buried. So did that. And the next thing you know, I'm in Connecticut. I'm very close to New York City, Connecticut. I'm driving up to Cape Cod because that's where the guy's buried. And I drove up to Cape Cod and left my 22-year coin there in the grass next to the grave.
Wow.
Did a graveside amend. So I'm 22 years sober, and I do that. Then I'm going to California all the time. So get sober, big, huge change in my life. I do a step work group with 9 other men, and it's a profound and huge change in my life. I mean, it was a big turning point for me. The next one happened when I was 27 years sober. So I'm going to California. I told you all the time, going out to Redondo Beach, and I'm seeing Jay all the time and his wife Adele, and they're big meditators.
Mm-hmm.
And they want me to go to this AA meditation meeting on Thursday nights. Now, I don't want to go to a stupid woo-woo California meditation meeting. Give me a freaking break. And I'm never there on Thursday night, so I'm good. You know, I mean, my business never put me there on Thursday night, so I was clean. And Adele, one time Adele, they were trying to talk to me about how I should do some meditation, and I was like, pfft. And Adele started punching me with her finger in the chest one time, saying, "You can't get sober, sane, and healthy on 11 and a half steps." And I was like, "Just watch me, honey. I haven't had a drink in 25 years. I'm doing just fine here." So anyhow, I'm a rare book dealer, and I was doing a book fair in LA, and Jay said, I was setting up on Thursday. He said, "You going to be done by 5 o'clock?" I said, "Yeah, 5:30. He said, "Well, all right, come pick you up, and we'll go out to dinner." So he comes down to LA, picks me up, drives me 45 minutes back to Manhattan Beach, and sandbags me with this Thursday night meditation meeting. And there's 40 people in the room, including Bill. So Jay's 40 people in the room. Jay apologizes for the small crowd. It's Valentine's Day, February 14th, 2008. And I'm absolutely knocked out. They do a little reading out of the big book, out of chapter on step 11. And I was just completely knocked out. I think the topic that night was, what books are you reading that have been helpful to you in your meditation practice? And I was just knocked out by what was going on with these people. And it was clear to me by the time the meeting ended that it was a real AA thing. Whatever people were doing, and they were doing all kinds of different things, they were all working on improving their spiritual life. That's what they were doing. They were enlarging their spiritual life. I mean, it says in the 12 steps, it's not just Jim and the whiskey. It says in the 12 steps, after the 12 steps, it says, the point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. That's an active verb. It's not like you go to the supermarket and get a loaf of bread and bring it home and you got it. You got to be making bread every day. So I came home from that meeting, and I must have made my wife and my sponsor crazy talking about it for 2 weeks. And finally, I thought, maybe I should do something. So I called Jay up and I said, "Jay, I need a book, Jay. I'm a book guy." And I did not know at that time not a single person in Southern Connecticut, Alcoholics Anonymous, who had a meditation practice. Not a single one. And I knew hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people by that time. So Jay, knowing my lack of theological beliefs, said, "You should read this book by Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now." So I got that book and I started reading it, and it was I've got all kinds of stories with just reading the book the first time and my pushback and then acceptance of blah, blah, blah. But I started, and I realized immediately that I had lost my skill set for doing things by myself. Just as the reason I had a big book meeting, I tried to read the big book by myself and it just wasn't working. So I started a meeting where we read the big book every week. Now here it is. I'm trying to get this meditation thing off the ground and I'm just not having a good time with it. So I started a meditation meeting in Fairfield on Tuesday nights after about, I'd been meditating for about a month, struggling with it for about a month. And I went to that meeting on Tuesday night, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So what's the format of that meeting?
Well, we basically stole what they did in California, although we mojoed it a little bit. So the format of that meeting is that we read either the 11-step material out of the big book or the tail end of the 11-step material out of the 12 and 12. And we have those on a card, two-faced card that have been laminated. Everybody gets one of those. So when the meeting starts, we decide what we read last week and we read the other one. And we just, and everybody reads a paragraph, goes around the room reading a paragraph. And then we sit in silence for 10 minutes. And then wherever the reader stopped, if the reader stopped on person number 8 in sitting around the room, person number 9 was the one who started sharing immediately afterwards. And the leader, whoever was leader, would pick some sort of topic and then they would share on that. So, and then at the end of the meeting, we do another 10-minute meditation.
That sounds cool. I'm hoping that people, I'm thinking about it myself, trying to maybe start a meeting like that in this area. We have some that aren't as silent, so to speak. We have prayer and meditation, step 11 meetings, but it really is more like a discussion meeting, the ones that I've been to.
So, John, I got to tell you, we're doing this meditation for a while, and I'm proselytizing. I really, really was shoving it down people's throats for way too long. I mean, 3 months is probably okay for that. I was probably doing it for 2 years, and I just, I became the meditation guy. But anyhow, I went to a meeting one time and spoke on the 11th step, and I did it. And one of the guys in the audience said, we have this meeting in Westport, which is the next town over. So it's a meeting in Westport. It's a meditation meeting. You should probably come. So Sarah and I went and tried it, and it was a fabulous meeting. And this meeting is now on Zoom. I go to 4 of these a week. They're 7 days a week, but I go to 4 days a week. And I want to, now you want a format? I think this is the perfect format for an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting ever. We go in and there's a spiritual reading. Spiritual reading, we change the book it's like one day at a time and daily reflections and blah, blah, blah. Book changes every day. So there's a spiritual reading. Then there's a 10-minute meditation, silent meditation. Now that's followed by a 10-minute speaker, and the speaker's on a clock. I mean, everybody's timed in this thing. So the speaker's on 10 minutes. They can talk about the reading. They can talk about their meditation that day. They can talk about their meditation practice. They can talk about how much their wife pisses them off. They can talk about anything they want for 10 minutes. Okay. And after that, by that time, it's normally, this meeting is a 9 to 10 o'clock meeting, East Coast time on Zoom. And one of them was also in person. After that, there's normally between 30 and 35 minutes left. We look at how many people there are. There's normally 25, give or take 5. One guy always does the math and says, okay, yesterday everybody got a minute and 6. And the timer is a minute and 6. And the group is really, really good about, they can be in the middle of a sentence. If the ding goes off, they shut up. Oh, my time's up. That's it. So that you've got a meeting with a spiritual reading, with a 10-minute meditation, with a 10-minute Alcoholics Anonymous speaker, and then everybody gets to share.
Here's what I'm thinking of, is that when people are listening to this episode, they may be thinking, can I get into that meeting or should I start my own? Is it an open, my guess is if you get too many people in the meeting, it kind of messes it up, but is it an open meeting?
Yeah, it is an open meeting, but I don't think the information is posted any place. If somebody wants the information, they can email me, and
yeah.
I'd be happy to connect you. And there's people have changed over the years. I mean, when we started out, everybody lived in Connecticut because we'd all been going to the Connecticut meeting. And today, if there's 30 people on the call, maybe 8 of them live in Connecticut, and the rest of them are in Florida or over in New York State, or in Massachusetts, or in Colorado, or in Louisiana, or in California, or in Oregon.
Right.
So, it's just, but there's probably, as I say, 25, give or take, every meeting, but there's probably 45 regulars. I mean, like I only go to 4 meetings a week out of the 7 that are available. So to finish off this journey of sobriety.
Yeah, milestones.
I quit drinking. Huge change. I mean, seismic change in my life. I actually did the steps in a step work group. Seismic change in my life. And I started meditating when I was 27 years sober, and it was a seismic change in my life. Everything was different. Everything was different.
I want to just real quick, I want to explore this a little bit further. When you talked about reading The Power of Now, and that really, it made a big difference in your life. Are you able to explain it a little bit deeper and how that affected you and how that changed you? Because I think people would want to know about that. Are you able to dive into it a little bit more?
Well, that particular book, what I do in my meditation practice has changed radically over the 16, 17 years I've been doing it. I meditate twice a day. I meditate for 15 minutes by myself in the morning, and my wife and I meditate for 15 minutes together after dinner. And she reads, I always read a couple of spiritual books, sometimes 3 spiritual books, short readings before I sit, because it gets my head into the right space. And Sarah reads out loud a couple, 3 pages out of whatever Buddhist book. We're big Buddhist book readers here in our household. And she would read a page or two of something at night, and sometimes we talk about it, and sometimes we don't. And then we sit together for 15 minutes in silence. And I got to tell you, it's one of the most intimate things we do in our lives together, is to sit in silence for 15 minutes every single night and try to actively enlarge our spiritual lives. The Tolle book was a challenge to me, because I would in the first 25 pages, there was 4 things I didn't agree with. I thought they were just stupid beyond belief. I mean, the one that I always remember is he said, listen, your mind is never in the present. It's always in the past or the future. And I thought, well, that's stupid. That's not true. But because Jay had given me the book and I had to read the whole bloody thing, and I was only up to page 23 at this point, or whatever, I said, okay, I got to pay attention to this. I'm going to pay attention and prove this guy's wrong. Well, I couldn't catch my mind in the present ever. It was always in the future or the past. So I had to go back to the book and say, okay, dude, you got that. I'll give you that one, and he just rolled with those things that were news to me, and it's what I said, it's 2008. So when I'm born at 43, so I'm like 65 years old, and I learned something profoundly important about me, that I'm never in the present. You got to be kidding me. I'm never in the present. So now I'm going to change that. I'm going to get in the present. Now, I had complained on a number of occasions for a number of years that, for instance, I would get to my office and I take a shower every morning, but I couldn't remember being in the shower. Couldn't remember, because I wasn't in the shower.
Right.
I was in my head thinking about the day and blah, blah. I would get to the office. I couldn't remember being in the shower. I couldn't remember what I had with a cup of coffee. I always have a cup of coffee, so I knew that was a certainty, but I couldn't really remember. And I read, I'm reading the newspaper and trying to eat. Blah. Multitasking is an oxymoron. I've learned. So I started this meditation practice, and I started this meditation meeting. So Sarah and I went to that meeting every Tuesday night for 6 years. And it was really interesting, because AA people you get a whole bunch of Buddhists in a room and they're kind of doing different stuff. But you get a bunch of alcoholics in the room who say they're meditating. Now, let me tell you, they're doing wildly different things. Just radically different things, which is a good news and a bad news kind of thing. It really is. It really is. It was what I needed in the beginning. But after about 6 years, we decided we were looking for something a little bit more structured, and we found a Zen Buddhist group that's run about 20 miles away from here on Thursday nights by 2 lady Buddhist priests, and there was a small group of 15 or so, and we started going to that rather than the Tuesday night meeting, and we've stayed good friends with those 2 ladies even through the whole Zoom period. But we went every Thursday night, and I delved more deeply into what the Buddhists are trying to do when they sit in silence, which is radically different. Alcoholics Anonymous, in our steps, we talked about the step, improving our conscious contact with God. Well, that's not an apt description of what the Buddhists are doing. So I'm doing that, but it changes all. It has to change all the time. If it doesn't change every time, you've stalled out and you're stale. You got nothing vital going for you.
Right.
I'm a Bob Dylan guy. He not busy being born, is busy dying, which is why I change what I say on get on my knees every morning, and I change what I say when I get on my knees at night. I do both of those things, and it's I just keep learning stuff. I sit in the mornings for the last 4 or 5 years rather than, I sat on a cushion. I had folded legs, then I sat on a kneeling bench, because I'm 80 years old. I get creaky. I couldn't do that. And in the mornings, for 5 or 6 years now, I sit in a chair with my feet up on a low windowsill, and a window's open, no matter how cold it is. It was damn cold this morning, 30 by 30 window. And I just pay attention to what's out there, because I just want to be there. I just want to be there with what's going on. If my whole point about meditation for me is to be more present in my life, then what I'm doing when I'm meditating is practicing stuff that I want to affect me when I get up off the cushion or leave the chair behind. And that's what I'm doing. But I keep realizing different things. It keeps changing all the time. What works for me and what doesn't work for me. And probably every 3 or 4 months, I think, William, what the devil are you doing here? This is just a waste of your time. This is just stupid. And then I realized, no, I haven't been that present in my life in the last 40 hours. And that's still my goal. That's still my goal.
I hear you, brother. Well, listen, Bill. Okay, when we started this out, my intent was to cover just a small bit of your story and then cover your book, okay? But I got so interested in what you were saying, I kept asking questions. I think what we're going to have to do is schedule some time to come back and talk about your book. Would you be okay with that?
I'd be fine with that.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this meeting out, and then we'll talk about some schedule. We'll talk about getting you back on the schedule. But I always close it out with page 164 from the Big Book, and it says, "Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. Clear away the wreckage of your past. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. May God bless you and keep you until then." Once again, Bill, I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you. I've appreciated it. It's been fun.
Now, remember, we do not want you sharing your toothbrush, but we would absolutely love for you to pause your device and share that episode with another friend or with a friend or family member. It may be just what they need today. Now, in terms of, this is the only thing I had a chance to prepare. It's a long story. I'm going to a hockey game tonight, and I'm a little rushed with getting things prepared. But we got a little bit of a listener feedback here that I wanted to get out there. This was, they're all important, but I just wanted to make sure, I was going to say this one's an important one, but they're all important, but I just wanted to make sure we got this out there as soon as possible. So, as those of you who are regular listeners to the program, you will know that we have somebody named Mike that is so gracious. He monitors our P.O. box, and he sent me in this image of a letter that Elizabeth wrote into him. And here's the letter. It says, "Howdy, John and Mike. My name is Elizabeth B. My home group is the Rockwall Club, and I also have an AA home group of and I also have an NA home group of SSRIP. Both are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, which is where I am from. Currently, I am incarcerated at the Mabel Bassett Women's Prison. We don't have a lot of AA or NA support here at our prison. There's only one support group, and it's every 2 weeks or so. I do my meetings with you on Sober Speak, and I also listen to Transitions Daily and Recovered. Good for you, Elizabeth. I want you to know that because of my relationship with God and the great fellowship I feel from listening to you daily, I have been able to stay clean and sober from meth addiction and from alcohol since October 24th of 2023. God bless you, Elizabeth. That's great. Your podcast and God's grace even got me through and continue to keep me sober after the loss of my beautiful 22-year-old daughter, who died last month because of complications from birthing her precious baby boy. I'm sorry to hear that, Elizabeth. I'm so sorry to hear that. She says, I want you to know that there is a massive amount of meth and alcohol available here, but all I have wanted is God's will, love and comfort in my life. And I often find that is by listening to my AA family in my quote unquote rooms, which are really my podcasts. And that's you. Big smiley face. Thanks. I could use an AA support via mail if anyone wants to interact. I have a little less than a year left to do here, and then I'll be going to sober living back in Oklahoma City area. Woohoo, she says. I'll get to go home to my home group. So anyone in the Oklahoma City area, Western Club, Rockwell group, and NASSRIP, I would love to get plugged in, and I need all the support I can get. I've worked my 12 steps and I live daily by 10, 11, and 12. I do the best I can here at the prison. I do the best I can too, Elizabeth. I get it. She says, thank you, John, and you, Mike, for making this a way for me to make it through this clean. Also, if you have a physical address for the podcast, Recovered, I would appreciate that. Sincerely, Elizabeth B., also known as Lavina N., here at the prison. So, that's very cool, Elizabeth. So if anybody's out there listening, and especially if you're in the Oklahoma City, and I'm going to throw this one in, especially if you're a woman, and you can communicate with Elizabeth and help her to get plugged in, we would greatly appreciate it. Just write me, John, JOHN, at soberspeak.com, and I will pass that on to, I don't have her physical address, but I think that Mike has that. So I'll pass that on to Mike, and we'll get you two hooked up, and then you'll be able to communicate with Elizabeth. So that'd be really cool. All right, everybody, there is another episode in the can. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week. May God bless you and keep you until then. And I think that's a wrap. Love you guys. Bye-bye.